James had always considered himself a man who could handle life with measured patience. Not the loud, showy kind, but someone who thought before reacting, someone who believed that calm reasoning was the ultimate weapon. He had worked hard to build a life of stability, with routines and small comforts he could rely on. His marriage to Sarah had been solid, or at least that was what he had believed. 7 years of shared birthdays, anniversaries, late-night talks, and weekend getaways had cemented in him a sense of security he rarely questioned. Yet, security, as he was about to discover, was often an illusion. The signs had been subtle at first, imperceptible unless you were actively looking for them. Sarah had grown distant over the past few months. She still greeted him with a kiss in the morning, still laughed at his jokes, but the small daily rituals, the conversations over coffee, the teasing texts during work hours, the casual brush of hands on the way to bed, had begun to vanish. She was present in body, but her attention, her essence, seemed to drift elsewhere. The evening of the party had started innocently enough. James had anticipated a casual work gathering for Sarah's colleagues, expecting polite conversation, a bit of dancing, perhaps a few drinks. But when she opened the door to leave, the expression on her face had given him pause. She was radiant, as always, her hair cascading over her shoulders, a dress that clung in all the right ways, but there was a spark in her eyes that made James uneasy. That spark wasn't mischief or playfulness, it was something sharper, something almost predatory. When they arrived, James immediately noticed the dynamic shift. Sarah's friends and colleagues formed small clusters, chatting, laughing, exchanging pleasantries. But Sarah herself gravitated toward one cluster in particular, and James's stomach tightened. Adam. The name had come up in casual conversation before, a colleague, someone she mentioned with admiration but never introduced to James. Tonight, it seemed, the introductions were intentionally skipped. Adam's presence dominated her attention, his hand occasionally brushing hers, the laughter they shared carrying just a hint too much intimacy for James to ignore. He tried to remind himself that perhaps he was imagining things, that maybe it was the angle of the lights, the way she tilted her head, the exaggeration of his own fears. But when Sarah noticed him watching and smirked, pushing him gently aside, her voice dripping with mockery as she said, "This party is for my ex. If you don't like it," something inside him snapped. The words lingered in the air, a knife twisting slowly. It wasn't just the smirk, the words themselves cut deeper than he could have anticipated. For a moment, James froze, unsure if he should confront her there in the middle of the crowd. He could feel his hands tightening into fists at his sides, his heart hammering in a rhythm he hadn't felt since college, during a football game where his team had lost by a single point. Every instinct screamed to grab her, demand an explanation, reclaim the respect that had been stripped from him with a single, careless phrase. But he didn't. He couldn't. There were eyes on them, and the crowd would only enjoy the spectacle of his humiliation. Instead, he stepped back, pretending nonchalance, pretending that he was merely taking in the atmosphere. But his mind raced. Every memory of their marriage, the quiet nights, the shared jokes, the mutual promises of fidelity, flashed before him. And alongside them, the creeping realization that something fundamental had shifted, that the Sarah he thought he knew might have been a stranger all along. Adam laughed at something she said, leaning slightly closer, and James noticed the way she responded, her body leaning in unconsciously, her eyes glinting with excitement that should have been reserved for him. The details, the brush of a hand, the small tilt of her head, the warmth of her smile aimed at another man, added weight to the gnawing dread growing in James's chest. He realized that the late nights, the secretive calls, the sudden overprotectiveness of her phone, were pieces of a puzzle that had been there all along, a puzzle he had chosen not to see. By the time he gathered the courage to approach, the two had moved to a quieter corner, their conversation hushed but unmistakably intimate. He could hear fragments, laughter that carried too freely, the casual touch of shoulders, a shared joke that he wasn't part of but felt like a sting in the ribs. James felt an icy clarity descend. He didn't need to hear more. He didn't need proof in the form of text messages, emails, or confessions. The body language, the energy, the smirk, it was all the evidence he needed. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the soft hum of conversation like a blade. "Sarah," he said, sharp, deliberate. The name alone made them both freeze. Her eyes widened, Adam's smirk faltered for the first time. And yet she didn't retreat. Instead, she straightened, her gaze locked onto his with a defiance that both infuriated and wounded him. The room seemed to shrink, the crowd fading into a blur, leaving only the three of them, suspended in the tension that had been building for months. I don't understand," James managed, his words tight, controlled, the edge of his usual calm replaced by a brittle veneer of self-restraint. "Why are you doing this? Why bring me here only to humiliate me?" His mind screamed, his rationality warring with the raw, animalistic surge of anger and betrayal coursing through him. Sarah's lips curved into that same smirk, unapologetic, unyielding. "If you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't be here," she said softly, the words a whispered challenge. Adam's presence beside her seemed deliberate now, a statement of possession, of shifting allegiances. James's pulse spiked, his thoughts scattering, and yet somewhere deep inside, a slow, methodical calm began to crystallize. He didn't need to yell, didn't need to beg. Every man who had ever faced betrayal knew that power came from control, from refusing to give the betrayer the satisfaction of witnessing your pain. He turned slightly, letting the moment hang, letting Sarah realize the depth of the impact her actions had wrought. Every subtle movement, every glance exchanged between them, was being catalogued, stored, and measured. He didn't trust her explanation. He didn't want one yet. The night wasn't over, and he wasn't finished observing, learning, understanding. By the time the party began winding down, James had made his silent decision. This wasn't a confrontation to be rushed. This wasn't a drama to be played out in public. There would be a reckoning, yes, but on his terms, with his strategy, with his control intact. The betrayal had been revealed. The smirk had been seen. And for the first time in weeks, James felt a clarity he hadn't known he was capable of. He wasn't weak, he wasn't a fool, and he certainly wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching him break. The ride home was quiet. Sarah tried to initiate conversation, small, casual questions, attempts at normalcy. James answered minimally, his mind elsewhere, plotting, analyzing, preparing. Every word she spoke was a potential clue, every gesture a potential piece of the puzzle. He wasn't angry yet, anger was too easy. He wasn't devastated, devastation was too public. He was calculating, steady, and when the moment came to act, it would be decisive. By the time they arrived at their home, James had rehearsed the confrontation in his mind dozens of times. He knew what he would say, how he would say it, what he would demand, and what he would refuse to accept. The betrayal was no longer a possibility, it was a fact. The smirk, the casual dismissal, the words aimed to wound, it all culminated into a truth he could no longer ignore.